Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group, where we model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation of this great industry. This episode is part of Prefab Unfiltered, recorded live at Advancing Prefabrication. Over the last decade, the conversation around prefabrication has shifted dramatically. We moved from should we do prefab to how do we scale it? But scaling prefab is not just about bigger shops or more automation. It's about leadership. It's about workforce development. It's about communication. And most importantly, it's about getting people to agree on what success actually looks like. That is exactly what today's conversation is about. Today, I'm joined by Steve Rose. Steve brings nearly 45 years of experience in electrical trade, workforce development, and prefabrication. He was an early adopter of prefab and packaging long before it became an industry mandate. From running work in the 1980s to scaling prefabrication operation across multiple region facilities, Steve has lived through the full evolution of prefabrication. This is a candid, experienced perspective on scaling prefab the right way, with systems, alignment, and buy-in. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast, presented by Great Tech Group. We are recording live from Advancing Prefab here in Dallas, Texas, and I am excited to welcome Steve Rose to the podcast. Thanks for joining me here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I always like to start with kind of your origin story. How'd you get into the construction industry?
Oh my goodness gracious! Well, the short and flat part of it is basically my ex-wife's mom told me so. Because I was 18 years old at age, getting ready to get married at 19, and she sat me down and asked me, well, what are you going to do to support my daughter? Okay, well, that was ex-wife ago and almost 45, that's actually over 45 years ago. But for me, my origin story was as soon as I got into the apprenticeship, I served 4 years. That's all the way back to 1981, turned out in 85, started running work in 1986 right away. And like a lot of folks, just started getting involved in different things. Prefab and packaging actually came to me sort of natural. I prefab and packaged the very first job I ever ran in 1986.
Wow.
Did not know that's what I was doing at the time. It's just I knew I had 11 of something that was exactly the same. I got my rear end kicked on thing number one, and I had 10 more of these exact same things. And it was like, oh man, I got to do something about that. So I reached out to the superintendent, gave him a list of everything I needed to have made times 10, asked him if there was somebody at the shop that could make it. He said yes. Everything came out, all palletized, all packaged. And it was as soon as it all started showing up, it was like, I should have made a drawing. That's what I should do, because I had a list of all the parts and everything that needed to be made, but I didn't have a drawing. That being said, I was able to make budget on the second one, and the other 9, we made money. So that was the beginning of prefab and packaging for me.
Very cool. You're a groundbreaker. I love it.
Well, I don't know about that, but I was an early adopter, and that's something that I've always had kind of inside of me, is this ability to look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a mentor once. His name was Cliff Thompson with Rosen Electric, one of the smartest people, most visionary individuals I've ever known. And he was one of those folks that always looked at things and it was like, why and why not? It's like, he'd look at something and think to himself, there's got to be another way, that just has to. So I've always been like that myself. I've been very fortunate to have been involved in prefab and packaging specifically, probably since roughly about 1999, 2000, when I got tapped to go in and revitalize a large contractor in Southern California, Sasco Electric's prefab shop. And that shop grew from about 3 individuals to about 40 individuals in about a 3-month period.
Wow.
And it's because we just did a lot of things differently. We started to bring in a certain level of automation in there. We started training people to do what I call 100% efficiency modeling. In other words, working with 2 hands. If this hand's doing something, this hand should be doing something as well, whenever you can. And it worked out pretty well. And then it's been a lot since. I've been part of the Advancing Prefabrication conference since 2017, when they had their very first event here. And I've been here almost every year since, not every single year. I took about a 3-year break, and then they reached out to me and asked me, would you be willing to come back for the 10th anniversary? We'd love for you to be able to do a 2-hour workshop on one day, presentation on another, and the rest is in the history, I suppose. I've been very fortunate. I've got almost 45 years in the trade and almost 30 years in the workforce development and apprenticeship program in Los Angeles County.
That's
So
awesome.
it's been fun.
We'll dig into your sessions here at Advanced Prefab in a minute, but before we get there, what have you seen change over the last, you started 40 years ago, really, with prefab and stuff. How has it evolved in that time frame?
Geez, how do you wrap that up? I've seen it go from everybody hated it, other than a handful of contractors that did it. The contractors that did it originally, they did it for one reason, and that was to increase their bottom line. That was the only reason. It's like, if we can find a faster way to do this, we can make more money. And it has since evolved, and I'm going to jump decades now. It's evolved from that probably in the 2000s, early 2000s, to here we are now, early in 2026. And now it's the client that's saying, you're going to prefab on my job. You're going to package on my job, and you're going to show me different ways that you can help accelerate my product. Is speed to market. It's everything to me. It's everything to everybody. It seems, doesn't matter what space. And I'd have to say the other thing that I've seen evolve greatly is we've gone from pencil and paper, or just even me describing to you how I want something and maybe writing it down. And now I see the digital workflows that are out there. It's unbelievable. You come to a show like this, for me, I used to speak at the NECA conference a lot as well. And that's the largest event in the electrical industry. And you would see the number of vendors every time at the exposition floor increase. And you'd see it, okay, it's not so much people making things, the building of things. It's people that have a software program that is hopefully going to help your enterprise be smoother and flow. And one of the difficult things I see that folks are trying to still figure out, and I think some folks are doing a better job than others, is trying to figure out, how do we make something that looks and feels and acts as much as possible like an actual ecosystem? People talk about ecosystem. The larger contractors, they have a tendency to want to make their own ecosystem, because then they can tie in their financials, they can tie in their purchasing. It doesn't matter who gets to see it, because it all lives in-house. But there's a lot of folks here as well at this show that are doing a great job at that. So I have to say that's one of the real big changes I've seen as well.
Yeah. It's been interesting. We've been covering this show for probably about 5 years, and when I think back on that first time that we came, it was like, oh, we got to get the education and the awareness out more to the rest of the industry of what prefab really is and the potential. And now that conversation is long, left the train station. Everybody knows what prefab is. They're bought into it. Now it's how do you scale it? How do you get it more repeatable? The owners are now in on the conversation and driving it, which is a really cool. I mean, that's how you scale it. It's a cool shift and evolution that's happened really quickly, if you think about it.
Oh, I would agree 100%. So the owners now, I think, that are driving this are probably making more headway in the adoption than any single individual or entity, because a company can say, we're going to scale, but what does that look like? How does it really work? Both of my workshop and my presentation yesterday were about scaling. It's like, if you're going from one shop, how do you scale to a second shop, to a 6th shop, to 14 shops? The company I used to work for, they branched out to about 14 regional shops. And one of the tough things is always, how do you scale? How do you get people to agree on what it is that everybody's going to do? Because there are going to be regional difference. People are going to try to want to do things different. If you're not from there and they don't know you, they're going to resist. And it's like, well, how do we get them to resist without just shoving it down their throats? How do we get them to agree to say, hey, we're open to doing something differently? Because that was a struggle that I always had, for sure, was trying to get folks to do something differently. And it didn't matter that it was better. And the things that I would show people at times when it was just me showing them were better, but just the same, it was different. And people resist that kind of change because it's people feeling like they're losing control. It's like, I'm no longer part of the process. Now I've got somebody just telling me what to do. So getting people to agree and getting people to buy in early, that's critical. You have to get all those regional shop leaders all together in a room and say, okay, we all need to agree that this is what we're going to do, not have it be a mandate. We need to agree to this, because if we agree to this, and especially if I say, hey, would you help me, Todd? I need for you to help me plan this. What am I doing wrong? What can I do better? Nobody wants to see the plan succeed like somebody who helped make the plan.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a critical point. How do you get the right people in the room at the right time and all agreeing on the same page there.
Well, you know what? When you figure that out, let me know. And the reason I say that is this. There's always a challenge in getting the right people in the room, because for starters, that's assuming that you know who the right people are to bring into the room to solve the problem, or whatever the problem is, whatever it is that you're getting together for. And also the right people in the room that can change. Sometimes it's okay, let's get all these people in the room right now, and then we'll start pulling back. And then we might have to grow the room again when we have some other sort of option or problem or something we're trying to solve. And then it shrinks. It's trying to be right-sized as a contractor. You know, when I was working for a said contractor for a lot of years, and I've worked for several, one of the things that you'd see that was always a chance that somebody was taking was scaling up. And even if it wasn't going into a region, it was getting a larger place. And if you get a really large place, you've got pallet racking for 1,200 pallets because you're anticipating growth in that area. You're figuring on getting more market share. Your prefab packaging is matured to a point where that's going to be a selling point for other people to give you work. When those pallet racks are full, you're going, God, dude, that was such a great idea. I'm so glad we did this. But then when the work shrinks and you no longer have that, you're looking at 1,000 empty spaces, you're looking at each other, and I'm blaming you and you're blaming me, going, Todd, Steve, yeah, what were we thinking? So being right-sized and having the right people in the room, that's a tough thing to manage, you know, because it's, again, you have to think about who are the right people in the room and at what point in time are they the right people? And is there a time when I just completely change hands? I'll get dealt a new deck of cards and just, okay, it's all new people? Or do we just filter those people back in and out? As long as everybody that's part of that is good with that, again, they're in agreement that, you know, we understand we're not always going to be a part of this team. We're not always going to be in the room. We're okay with that because that's what the organization needs.
So that requires ego to be checked at the door, a little bit of humility to enter in.
It does. It does.
It
does.
Maybe a difficult thing as
can
people in general.
Oh, it can be. I'd have to say everybody has a certain level of ego. I mean, I know that I like to think of it as a healthy ego.
Yeah.
You know, I like to think of it as more confidence born of experience. I'm certainly not the smartest person ever in the room, and that's okay because I'm usually the oldest and the most experienced.
I like it. So how do you define then what success looks like between the back office, the shop, and the field?
Okay, for the whole entirety of the value stream, I'd have to say everybody might define success differently for their role.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if we get everybody in the room, if we get those folks in the room from the back office, part of the operations, the truth tellers or the folks that are installing the prefab and the packages in the field, if you can get them together at the very beginning, we're like talking a conceptual. It's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this for this job, and this is how we're going to do it. What metrics do we want to see? What matters to you? What matters to me? What matters to the person over here? You get them all in the room together and you define that on the front end. What does success look like to us? What will it look like to us? Is it just more money to the bottom line? Is it reducing processes? Is it getting rid of a process? Maybe we find a process that's being repeated 3 times in the value stream from back office through operations through the field. So I think one of the most important things there is figure out what success means to everybody on the front end. Because it is going to mean something different to somebody else. You know, for me, if I was the electrician in the field, going up a ladder and slinging light fixtures, how many light fixtures I get in a day, how many rooms I can rough in, that's going to be a measure of success. Where the project managers are going to look at and go, how much money did that cost? How much money did I save? And the general foreman and the superintendent, people in charge of labor, they're going to go, how many man hours did that take? How many man hours did I save? So everybody has a different way of measuring pretty much the same thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big believer in having the North Star. And then once everybody agrees on this is the one common denominator, then each team can have their own sub component of how you're going to get there. And then that's how you kind of build on top of everybody.
I do like the idea of the true north. And a lot of folks, and I learned this from somebody else that I used to work with, they would call it the single source of truth. You'd call it the single source of truth. We're all going to look at the North Star and we're not looking in different directions. We've all agreed on what the North Star actually is and where it is in the sky. Say, yep, that's North Star. Are you sure? I think that's a satellite. Pretty sure that's the space station. So it's one of those kind of things that everybody, again, has to agree that this is true north. This is the one source of truth that we're going to go with. And we all want to go in that direction.
Right. Yeah. And then accept it, even if you don't necessarily think of it like once it's settled, it's settled.
that's the North Star. We're going to go towards it.
Yeah. And again, everybody has to be able to buy in, but the sooner the better. Agree that's the North Star and that's the direction you're going.
Yeah. What are some common disconnects then that kind of help prevent that from happening between, getting the planning to execution smoothed out? What are those disconnects in the team that happen?
Oh, I think some of the disconnects, well, this is going to sound bad if I bash on project managers in the office, but I do see a disconnect too often with project management that don't get involved in the job early enough. Also see contractors that have too many projects on the project manager's plate to be able to try and manage. I'm doing project management right now at the apprenticeship we have in Los Angeles, 144,000 square foot facility, and we're doing a big remodel on about 8,000 square feet of it, and I'm doing the project management for that. Goodness gracious, that thing's taking up way too much of my time just for that one thing. So for people to get involved in trying to figure out where the disconnects are and everything else, that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough. People fell at different places. I think that in the field, the most common disconnect I've seen in the field is at the foreman level. It's the crew foreman level, or maybe at the general foreman level. I've seen that disconnect manifest itself way too many times in safety, where a foreman or general foreman will say, okay, do not stand on the top of the ladder. Right. Okay, good. Sign there on that piece of paper. We had a safety meeting. And then 20 minutes later, when I walk the room and you're on the top of the ladder and I go, Todd, dude, we just talked about this. What are you doing out there? Oh, Steve, I'll be 2 minutes. I'll be done. Okay, well, don't get hurt. Hurry up. As soon as I've done that, that's a disconnect. I've just told that person and every other person on the job, safety really doesn't matter. I just need to make sure that you sign here. I just have your signature on the piece of paper. So there's disconnects that I think at all levels, at all stratifications of the process. And people, again, I think at times they don't meet together enough to discuss those things early on, because there's almost always going to be early indicators that there's a disconnect, and most people just don't want to either own it or they don't want to tell anybody.
So how do you bridge that gap to smooth it out?
Communication. I'm going to pick on another previous leader that I had. His name was Dave Elkins, Senior Vice President of Field Operations for Rosen. Great company, have been with him for about 3 years. But he said so to me also that was really resonated and stuck with me. There's almost no such thing as over communicating. So going back to, if you want to bridge the gap between the entirety of the value stream, all the way from inception to you're turning on that last light switch and the job's been commissioned and you're walking out, speaking as an electrician, flipping the switch, that disconnect happens all the time. And if you're going to bridge that gap, it's going to have to be through communication. And fortunately, I think what's helping with that now is the advent of so many digital how do I want to put this? So many digital ways of doing that. There are so many different software programs that have, they're gate checked and all kinds of things. You can't do this without doing that. We can't give you your delivery if you don't fill out these fields, required fields, and so something super simple like that. But if you think of your entire process, the entire build from inception to flipping that light switch, if you're going to bridge the gap, it's going to have to be through communication. It's going to have to be just constant. I mean, to the point where you're almost basically just tired and good Lord have mercy, we're having another meeting again. But that's okay. Have the meeting, but have it be, we're talking about this, and this. And these are the only 5 things we're talking about. And then we're done. We're not going to have niceties. We're not going to say, hey, how you doing? We're not going to have coffee and crumb cakes. We don't have time for that. It's a 25-minute meeting. We've got 5 things to talk about. They each get 5 minutes. We're all going to agree on what those 5 things are in our action items, in the action orders, and then we're on to business.
Yeah. I mean, to your point on the over communication, if I put my marketing hat on, it takes 7 to 10 impressions before somebody takes any sort of action whatsoever, even if that's like the see more button, a very simple thing. So it takes so many repetitions in order to get the message in front of them for it to really resonate with us. And our attention span is only getting shorter and shorter.
Oh yeah. You're talking about me personally now, right? And it's not that my attention span is shorter, but I tell you what, something I've noticed, the memory starting to go. So writing things down, that helps, putting notes in the phone, things like that, using those kinds of tools to be able to keep you on track. Because I'm always ever only just 1, 2, or 3 doorways away from going, why'd I walk into here? What was it? What was I getting ready to do? Sometimes I can barely make it out of my office and I stop and then I have to turn around, go to my office, look at a couple things and I go, oh, that's right. I was going to go talk to so-and-so about such and such.
Yeah. You're in good company. Okay.
Okay, good. I'm not alone.
All right. Not alone. Yeah. We go downstairs. Why am I down here? All right.
Oh yeah. I can't even get to that.
So let's talk about your class and your workshop. What were the main themes coming out of those?
Okay, so for the workshop, it was about scaling to multiple facilities at one time. And it was interesting because the room was mixed. There were people that had a single facility and they were thinking about upscaling to two. Some were one facility, but they wanted to get a larger facility. So that's scaling away, getting a larger size, being able to increase the footprint inside of the building for their prefab and packaging operations. And some folks were going from 3 to 4 to 6. And it was a good workshop. There was about 25 people in the room, perfect. So I had 5 tables of 5 each. They had 3 different exercises that they needed to go through. And just like your typical workshop at a convention like this, there were some folks that had all kinds of stuff written down on for the different exercises. And there's folks that had blank pieces of paper. Sure. And most people were at some point in between, because a lot of the value of those workshops are just getting 5 different individuals from 5 different companies, from 5 different disciplines. Not that they're all disciplines, and they were all different disciplines, and I didn't monitor that. But you've got mechanical sitting with electrical and plumbing, or all electrical, or whoever they are, and they're talking about their pain points. They're talking about what they did to scale. They were talking about how difficult it was and what worked for you. How did that work out for you? And more than anything else, when you're facilitating something like that, you're really just the guide on the side. It's just like, here's the outline, here's the plan, but we've got 2 hours to work on this. Here's the first workshop exercise you're going to do. Here's the second one. Here's the third. You're going to go through it. You get 30 minutes each. And it was very successful. I had lots of people come up and talk to me afterwards, wanted to get my information. I got one person after yesterday's session come up and ask me if I did consulting. And I've had some amazing conversations with people at this conference.
Yeah.
Probably more so than I have in, I think I've been here 7 previous years.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. And the conversation yesterday was all about, it was 30 minutes to try and get people from cradle to grave. And that was the name of the session, was Cradle to Grave, Prefab and Packaging and Material Movement Through Your Shop. How to go all the way from, if you're doing DFMA, if you're doing design for manufacturing and assembly, or if it's just a handwritten drawing that somebody sends in from the field, how do you manage all of the material? And it's mostly about timing. Because we had people in there that were anywhere from 2,000 square foot facilities to 40,000 square foot facilities. And a 2,000 square foot facility is extremely difficult. If you're going to do something in a 2,000 square foot facility, you're going to have to figure out what is the most bang for every single square foot, because every square inch in that place has value. Mm-hmm. And you have to figure out what it is that you're going to do. There's going to be a lot of things you're just going to have to leave off the table until you get to a larger facility. That's all there is to it. But yeah, that was a really good one. That had about 50 people in it. And that was very interesting. A lot of fun.
You had 30 minutes to cover all that. You're ambitious.
Yeah, I turned it into 40. Especially, okay, if there's going to be questions or answers, if there's going to be questions, I'll have to wait for, come up here. And people had questions, and they came up and talked to me and asked me questions.
Yeah.
Because it was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to give anybody any time for Q&A.
Right.
It's just, I had 18 slides, and even that was probably too many for a 30 or 40 minute session. I've done 2-hour sessions before and 12 slides.
Yeah.
Because it's not about what's on the slide. It's about the experience and the knowledge that we're going to be able to impart. And this is just talking points to just keep me on track.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about bridging the gap. I need something like, this, bridging the gap. I need something that says, okay, I got to go from here to here to here. And there's gaps in between.
Sure.
So that kind of stuff, it helps keep me on track.
I like it. Any big takeaways from the conference?
Boy, it's, I hope people that listen to your podcast, I hope there's people in that audience that weren't here, or that people that were here shared with them. Because if you are not here and you're in prefab and packaging, either your ego has gone in the way and you've decided you already got it all figured out, or you're just not willing to invest. I won't say spend the money. It's going to be an investment to send somebody. It costs folks money to come here. I'm one of the fortunate ones. Nobody had to pay for me to come here by myself. I took a week's vacation and I've basically self-funded this entire trip. Might be the only one, but that's okay because it's worth it.
Yeah. I like it. What's a conversation that people should be having in prefab this year that maybe we're not, or we need to be having it more?
I'm going to have to noodle on that one for a second. Adoption is really not so much the issue. Buy-in, I don't think, is so much the issue. Depends on who you are and where you are. Some contractors, they still have challenges just internally with people buying in. A lot of people, they'll complain about, well, we're touching it too many times. Well, okay, you say that now because you're definitely redirecting the material to a shop to touch it and put it together. But if you followed somebody on the job site to build that same assembly, how many gang boxes, how many boxes are they going to open? How many different buildings for different gang boxes are they going to go to get that material to make that same product? So I think conversations that folks need to be having now, especially looking at the future, is how to, and I don't want to say do more with less, but they need to expand. I think everybody needs to expand their prefab operations. There's only a handful of regions that are not having labor issues, labor shortages, skilled labor. I happen to be in one. There's 9.5 million of us in LA County. We have zero issues with getting people in the pipeline that want to become an electrician. And when I say zero, I mean zero. We'll get 30,000 applications literally in a single day.
Wow.
We can only accept 2, but we'll have 30,000 people that try to apply. The rest of the country, that's not like it. You're a data center and you're going in South Carolina because that's a great place for whatever the reason is. You're going to have struggles. You're either going to be importing labor from other states, other regions, or you're going to have to upscale everybody as fast as you can to how your building needs to get built. And, I'm an old electrician. We would go, well, it's all just pipe and wire, but it's not all just pipe and wire anymore. That's not it. Now it's all these different types of assemblies and things are coming out, and you have to coordinate access into the job. Everything about the process has to be coordinated. It all has to move upstream and downstream. The entire length of that value stream has to be coordinated. So I think for people now, it's figuring out if you're going someplace that is a region that you're going to build some giant hyperscale data center or anything, whatever it is in a region that has a labor shortage, how do you bridge that gap before you get there?
Yeah. So as we start to end the conversation, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. What does the phrase modeling the future mean to you?
Oh, goodness gracious. Modeling the future? Ooh, I suppose it depends what you mean. If you're talking about modeling, like BIM modeling, I think modeling the future means that you're going to actually create digital twins of the job site, and you're going to overcome the fact that nobody actually wants to do that, or nobody actually does. It has to be, we're going to model the future, meaning that job that we're going to build over there, we have actually modeled it, every single thing right down to the last nut and bolt and screw. And oh, by the way, you're going to build it exactly like the model. We're not going to have to worry about as-bills. We're going to have to worry about conflicts. It's all been modeled. It's perfect. You're going to go. That's modeling, just talking about building information modeling. Modeling the future, I think it's going to go back up a little bit to what we were talking about, what you're doing for upskilling the workforce, workforce development. That's going to be huge. That is a gap across the country, not so much in LA, but the rest of the country, they're experiencing it.
Yeah. What does innovation mean?
Innovation could be anything from, hey, I just made this widget that exists just a little bit better because I tweaked it just a little bit, to in a completely different mindset going, I'm going to create something for the industry that does not exist. Now, of course, for you to want to create something that does not exist, there has to be a need for it. So when you're talking about something like that, that's completely different. Innovation can look so very different depending on where you are in the space to anybody, who's asking the question or trying to answer the question.
How do people connect with you and learn more?
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, let's see. John's got my information. You guys are welcome to share it. Everybody in the LA County pretty much knows who I am, unfortunately, because I've been there for almost 45 years. The people that don't know me, they probably heard me. And everybody knows I'm with the apprenticeship program. So that's really easy to get all of me there at the Training Trust.
Awesome. Well, last question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
Oh, I'm going to, for this crazy. You just gave me Thanos's towel. I get to snap my fingers and innovate.
Great power comes great responsibility.
I know. That's why I got to think about this for a second. That was a rapid fire question, but you might not get a rapid fire answer. If I was to innovate one thing, goodness gracious, I'd have to say acceptable standardized installation practices. Whether you're an electrician, it is in some ways, the products are still the products. There's still pipe and wire, a new box comes out, a new bracket, a new ring. But if you could standardize how people communicated, it's like if you can standardize how something is built, and I'm expanding a little more than probably the question was, because it's certainly not one thing, but I do have a lot of infinity stones over here, right?
That's right.
I'd have to say, try to get everybody up to scale as fast as possible. If I was going to innovate one thing, it would be communication. It'd be figuring out how to create that. I think I'm going to settle on that. It would be the communication. It would be having that digital ecosystem so that everybody could be speaking the same language, the same exact language. You need to get them the Rosetta Stone.
I like it. That communication is huge. So that's a good one. We'll snap and make it happen. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Oh man, glad to be part of it. It was great questions. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Todd.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take. Prefabrication has shifted from margin play to market mandate. Prefab used to be a contractor-driven strategy focused on labor efficiency and margin protection. Today, it is often driven by owners demanding speed to market, especially in data centers and mission-critical construction. That shift changes the pressure. It raises expectations, and it requires contractors to scale fabrication operations faster and more intentionally than ever before. Prefab is no longer optional, it's strategic. Second take. Scaling prefabrication is a leadership challenge. Opening a second or third fabrication facility is not just an operational milestone, it's a cultural one. Scaling prefab requires clear definitions of success across the shop, field, and back office. It requires training, it requires systems, and it requires the right leaders in the room who understand both manufacturing discipline and job site reality. Growth without alignment creates chaos. Alignment creates scale. And finally, communication is the most underrated lever. Technology matters, automation matters, but communication drives adoption. When field teams, project managers, and shop leaders understand the goal and trust the process, prefabrication gains momentum. When communication breaks down, resistance grows. Industrialized construction is relational as it is technical. Prefab scales when people are aligned. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at greattech.com. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.